All right, Molo Sambonani, hello, how's it? Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to the Thursday edition of Vuka Nazo, your morning news analysis show. It's the 1st of December, people. Whew, you've made it. You've made it to the tail end of what has been a rather eventful and very busy 2022. Welcome to it. This is this is Vuka Nazo, your morning news analysis show. Remember, if you love the work that we do, if you like the content and all that good stuff, well, then do me a favor, hit that like button. Give me a nice little review. It's a mini review in a sense. When you hit that like button, whether you're watching the simulcast on Facebook, YouTube, or on Twitter. Good morning, Sanbonani. Welcome to it. Hit that like button, please. And remember, if you're watching on YouTube in particular, do me a solid favor and hit that subscribe button. Help me reach my goal of 40,000 subscribers by the end of the year. Now, I'll admit things are looking bleak in that regard. I'm only sitting at 37,000, if I believe. Plus, but it is growing. It is growing. Credit to those who have joined and our new subscribers. Welcome to it. Super appreciate your being here. And of course, you can find me and all my content at bigdaddyliberty.com. There, of course, you can also pledge some financial support to the show. Guys, between 50 and 100 Rand a month really is a contribution that goes a long way to helping me put the show together. If you go to the website, you'll find a payment method that suits you. Now, with that being said, if you like how I start your news day, then you'll love my friends over at the Daily Friend. They come to you, of course, Mondays to Thursday, live at 1:30 p.m. Join them, and they'll help you wrap up your news day. Now, with that jibber jabber out of the way, how about we do the good stuff and get straight into the news? Okie dokie, folks. Quickly catch a swig of water there. It is an interesting morning. It truly is now, perhaps, a new dawn. It truly is perhaps now a new dawn in the sense of President Cyril Ramaphosa pretty much in a lot of trouble here, where you'll remember we spoke about it in yesterday's Vuka Nazo, that Section 89 panel that was put together by Parliament in order to basically investigate whether there are any grounds for impeachment, that is, for the removal of the President of the Republic based on the Phala Phala Farmgate scandal. Well, that report came back, and it came back hot. As former Chief Justice Ngcobo handed over the report to Parliament. The contents of that report are rather lengthy in nature, so I won't summarize them in detail here, except let me give you basically some of the key findings which really point to the president having a case to answer. I'm going to put that on screen. There it is right there. And it's quite clear, really, the report, insofar as it says, viewed as a whole, that's the allegations of the stashing of money and the illicit investigative sort of rogue unit that was set up by the president, allegedly. Viewed as a whole, those allegations, the information presented to the panel prima facie establishes that, firstly, there was a deliberate intention not to investigate the commission of the crimes committed at the Phala Phala openly, that's his farm in Limpopo. Number two, the misconduct based on violations of the provisions of Section 96(2)(b) and the violation of Sections 34(1) of the PRECA, that's the PRECA Act, were committed to keep the investigation a secret. Again, secrets in a democracy. Anyway, the request to the Namibian police to, quote, handle the matter with discretion confirms this intention to remain or to use secrecy. The president abused his position as head of state to have the matter investigated and seeking the assistance of the Namibian president to apprehend a suspect. And lastly, of course, there was more foreign currency concealed in the sofa than the amount reflected in the acknowledgement of receipts. This raises the source of the additional currency, or raises the question of the source of the additional currency. I repeat here, I think the phrasing of this particular report is actually quite important. It's basically saying there is enough evidence to go forward, perhaps, with a better investigation on the first hand, and then, of course, go forward with an impeachment hearing, which will bring out more evidence, more data, and the like. There's enough evidence, prima facie, initial evidence, if you will, in order to go on here. And now, again, as I said, a lot of pressure on Cyril Ramaphosa, with, as you can imagine, his detractors having a field day at the moment, basically pointing out that this should mean he should step aside, or as a one Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, or Buffalo Bill, as we call her here on the show, has already come out and said, Zweli Mkhize, I've yet to see comment from him. Now, I mentioned Zweli Mkhize because he is going to be an opponent to Cyril Ramaphosa at the upcoming ANC elective conference. That is what this is all about. That is what this is all about for his opponents. It is an attempt, if you will, to have him removed as a contender because of these allegations. Now, let me get into the response by Cyril Ramaphosa, because he has come out and basically said, pish posh, please don't take these findings too seriously. That's the tone from Ramaphosa, of course, in a statement saying the presidency noted the submitted report to the speaker, of course, from the Section 89 panel. The president appreciates that according to the rules of the National Assembly needs to consider the report and determine the most appropriate way forward. The process has presented an unprecedented and extraordinary moment for South Africa's constitutional democracy. The conclusions of the panel require careful reading and appropriate consideration in the interest of stability of government and the country. He goes on to say, Ramaphosa reiterates the statements he made in a submission to the independent panel, quotes, I've endeavored throughout my tenure as president not only to abide by the oath, but to set an example of respect for the Constitution, for its institutions, for due process and the law. Doesn't that sound familiar? AKA one Jacob Zuma. Could we see a Stalingrad technique being adopted by Ramaphosa? Stalingrad, of course, being made famous, Stalingrad technique rather, being made famous by one Jacob Zuma of delaying justice. But nonetheless, he concludes by saying the president is giving consideration to the report and an announcement will be made in due course, of dismissing these allegations as being false against him and that he's not guilty of the allegations against him, end of quote. Now, this is going to play out today, as I said, in the politics of it all. So keep an eye out for that. We'll probably talk about this in greater detail, solid analysis from the Friends panel this Sunday. And we'll see what they have to say about this particular issue. So don't miss it. That will be Liberty and Friends Sunday at 8 p.m. Until then, the question is, and we always said in Zulu, Kazigo Zala Nkomon. All right, folks, I'm going to swiftly move us along to another character. In fact, I alluded to him in the previous story, who employs that Stalingrad method to his legal woes of delaying cases, the numerous cases that he faces until kingdom comes, seemingly, and if anything, also with the allegedly corrupt institutions of state granting certain privileges to the political elites like medical parole. Yes, that president, a one Jacob Zuma, of course, made headlines after this last weekend, He was visited by congregants of the Nazareth Nazareth Baptist Church, commonly known as the Shembe Church, although they don't really like that particular description of their church. Let me just put this on screen because, again, for me, the scene made a mockery and really rubbed our noses in it as South Africans as to why medical parole as an institution employed by the Correctional Services Department in this country is absolutely corrupt. It is absolutely corrupt. And the doctors who are effectively making the recommendations for certain politically connected individuals or even politicians getting medical parole are basically asking us to ignore what we can see, what we can literally hear, what we can literally receive through our senses as someone who's fighting fit, but we're being told is terminally ill or basically on clocking his way out in terms of nearly kicking the bucket. We saw this in yesterday's Vuka Nazo again, sadly, not sadly, but just aptly, with Shembe and Zuma partying it up at the launch of the Zuma restaurant. Now, here you have a situation where UJZ appeared before the Shembe Church again, which visited his homestead in Nkandla. Let me just put that up on screen properly. There it is. Fighting fit, man. There you go. You can see a photo of him over there. Former President Zuma receives blessings from the Shembe Church on Thursday. Congregants of the Shembe Church made the way to the venue in Nkandla to a highly anticipated meeting between their leader, Unyazi Lwezulu Shembe, and the former President Jacob Zuma. Zuma was joined, of course, by provincial leadership, led, of course, by Usboniso Duma. And here's the thing of what happened here. In light of the never-ending legal battles, Zuma pleaded for prayers from the Nazareth Church. Zuma saying that no one has had to endure legal battles that have dragged on over so many years. That statement is what I found particularly ironic and rather amusing, because it's dragged on over these years because of primarily Jacob Zuma. That has been his strategy to stay out of possibly adverse findings against him in the courts, which may see him go to prison. That little stint of 15 months at the Constitutional Court gave him of prison time for his contempt of court was perhaps the closest which Jacob Zuma had ever been to facing jail time. And it's what made the whole thing ironic, was that same guy who then, when he did get a taste of prison, did seemingly, allegedly, everything to get out by way of getting medical parole. We were told he was sick. Gravely ill man. This is what that gravely ill man did when he was amongst the Shembe faithful. Oh, wow. Very ill man, that is. Can barely walk. Looked like he was about to die. Again, I just raised the story because for me, it makes a mockery of medical parole. And you'll very well find, if you're to investigate this issue, that there very well may be prisoners who are deserving of medical parole, but for them, because they're not in the political elites, because they're not high regard individuals, maybe for them, medical parole doesn't come, or becomes a bigger fight for them to get medical parole. That is the nature of South Africa. I've always argued that the real divide in South Africa is between the political elites and politicians and us here at the bottom, ordinary citizens who have to go the extra long mile to get what political elites seemingly get rather easily. Now, on the issue of the Nazareth Baptist Church, or the Shembe Church, very interesting church this, and one which I think not much is known about in the broader society, but they're a very influential voice in this country. It is very interesting to see politicians basically come before Unyazi Lwezulu, that's Duduzi Shembe, who's the leader, of course, of the one faction, at least, of the Shembe Church. We saw 2 weeks ago, or last week rather, Zweli Mkhize, who will be standing for election at the ANC conference, also coming to Unyazi Lwezulu for blessings. And here you are now, an image of Jacob Zuma doing the same thing. I think a lot more has to be said about this church. It's a very interesting institution, and one which is worthy of maybe a nice documentary on. So we'll look to doing that. Have a look at this image to see how much reverence people hold the figure of the Shembe Church, if you want. Jacob Zuma, they're seen kneeling before Duduzi Shembe, of course, the Unyazi, pardon me, Lwezulu. Again, I raise this not because I have an issue with the Shembe Church, not at all. In fact, you guys know me enough on the show to know that I'm a very big proponent of faith as one of the cornerstones of our values as South Africans. If anything, I'm trying to tell you I'm very interested in this particular church, as it is, here in KZN at least, a massive massive following, not only in KZN, but in the rest of the country, and is a very influential voice. And I think we'll definitely start looking into this church more, learning more about it and really what it stands for. So with that being said, let me just move us on from this segment, because it was a very interesting one for me to see Jacob Zuma sort of like a lot of politicians recently looking to this church for prayer, blessings, and salvation, even in some cases. We'll have to wait and see. All right, folks, as I try and take us along here, I come to my next story, which really, for me, this one, just it exemplifies we're stuck as a nation. I mean, here you have hundreds of people who are from the ANC and the South African Communist Party randomly deciding to go protest against a 68-year-old man who recently was stabbed in prison. It begs the question, a lot of people ask this question on social media, why? Why was this even necessary? There you go, there's a headline on screen there. Hundreds marched to protest the release of Chris Hani's murderer, Janusz Walus. And a lot of people asking why. This guy's literally done everything required of him insofar as him serving his sentence, which is he's served 28 years already in prison, making him eligible for parole, to which the Constitutional Court eventually gave him the parole. He's actually followed the law, if anything else. Why protest this guy who's literally serving his sentence? And I remember we spoke yesterday about there being two schools of thought around this, two conspiracy theories, if you will. The first being that perhaps there's a fear that the release of Janusz Walus, and specifically releasing him and allowing him to go back to Poland, may risk him maybe, quote, spilling the beans, as we're sort of saw the rumor mill go into. And the other, of course, which also begs the question, that desperation to keep him in the country. On to that particular point, I want to read a quick quote here in this Times Live piece, which was quoting Paila, who's the SACP leader, of course. He was outside of Nkosi Mampuru prison protesting. On Wednesday, members of the Tripartite Alliance, the ANC, SACP, and COSATU marched to Nkosi Mampuru prison in Pretoria, demonstrating their dissatisfaction with last week's court order. Shortly after arriving, the crowd, demanded that officials who were armed leave, as demonstrators were, quote, not there to fight. Mapaila, the communist leader, welcomed the decision by Home Affairs Minister Aaron Matsoaledi to this week to grant Walus permanent residence for him to serve his parole in South Africa. He's quoted as saying, "We want to say that we agree with Matsoaledi for restoring the citizenship of this criminal, because without a citizenship, this man will be released here and go." Why is he so desperate or fearful of him going? But anyway, if this rescission application fails, he immediately leaves the country. We want him here to serve his sentence, as parole is a continuation of sentence, Mapaila said. I want to quickly read the response by Correctional Services, whose spokesperson said, a decision on when Walus will be released will be taken by Lamola, that's released on parole. End of quote. Again, I raise this story because it begs the question. There's two theories, I said. The first, as you heard me mention, is a fear of releasing Walus, and specifically releasing him to Poland, where there's a maybe fear that he will spill the beans. What those beans are, I have no idea. It's all conspiracy at this point. And the second, of course, is this fear of this character even being alive. I mean, which I believe would be the most likely reason that, the attempt on Walus's life was simply out of spite, to kill a man who has served his sentence and was now, being released on parole, and out of spite, simply to kill him. Now, I still believe that's the second motive, and I think the investigation, when it's concluded and made public, will basically reveal that that is the case. Either way, to have hundreds of people on a random day rock up to protest this guy, just rings as stupid and really frivolous, and really points to how in this country, petty politics rules the day. We have hundreds of people protesting over some asshole of a criminal in prison at the moment. But what about a protest against load shedding? What about a protest against the corruption of Cyril Ramaphosa or Jacob Zuma or whatever the case may be? What about the protest against crime in this country? These are real issues, but what are politicians doing? They're focusing on these literally, in a sense, petty issues that obviously give them mileage, but do nothing for the rest of us as South Africans. People, at some stage, we need to wake up and choose better. All right, folks, I'm going to end it over here with one more story, one which I think is a slightly, it's a tragic story, but its outcome is actually rather a reasonably good one insofar as usually this doesn't happen. Unfortunately, the community of Greytown was rocked by a farm murder, a farm attack that led to the murder, of course, of a elderly man in that part of the world. Let me just get this graphic on the screen. Just bear with me, people. And even as I do this, please hit that like button. There it is. I think there it is. There it is. Police killed 2 suspects, arrest 6, linked to the murder of an 84-year-old Greytown man. The 84-year-old, of course, was Hans Yuri Venter, who was suffocated, strangled to death by these 6 men, allegedly, after they effectively raided his house in the early mornings of Tuesday and robbed him, murdering this man. Another farm murder in this country. Greytown, of course, not being that far from me and my farm in this part of the world. So I definitely pass my condolences, pardon me, to this family. KwaZulu-Natal police have killed 2 suspects, and I welcome that, by the way, and arrested another 6 allegedly linked to the murder and robbery of 84-year-old Greytown resident Hans Yuri Venter, who was allegedly tortured before being killed in a house robbery on his farm in Seven Oaks. That's around 2 a.m. on the 20th of November. On arrival to the scene, this is according to police spokesperson Constable Tenjiswa Ngobo. On arrival at the scene, the police, of course, and security guards found the body of Hans Yuri Venter, 84, in his house. That is, his house was also ransacked, and some of his belongings, such as a television, laptop, jewelry, and cell phone, were stolen. Can you imagine that? A human life over a few trinkety items like that. But anyway, the victim was suffocated and strangled, according to police. And of course, this is the good part of the story, although sadly it won't bring back the human life, but we welcome the great step towards justice. In the early hours of Tuesday, Greytown Police, the Pietermaritzburg K9 unit, and of course the Pietermaritzburg Trio task team and a security company embarked on an intelligence operation after receiving information on the whereabouts of the suspects. They proceeded to the Boston area, where they spotted 8 suspects traveling in 2 vehicles towards Mpandle, where when confronted, the armed men opened fire on the police officers and a shootout ensued during a high-speed arrest. That's according to, of course, the police spokesperson. End of quote. It begs the question, how many more people have been murdered by these evil, murderous criminals? And that the fact that there are 2 body bags of those criminals right now, I welcome that. I don't care what people say, or you shouldn't celebrate, murder and blah, 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 blah. I'm not celebrating murder. I'm celebrating justice. These police officers who, in a dogmatic way, kept to the story, followed the trail, and literally apprehended these 8, 2 of whom died, and 6 are now behind bars and will be facing charges of murder, robbery, and the like. I very much welcome that. I've always said this, and I'll say it once and I'll say it again. The ordinary police members in this country are really making an effort. They're trying their level best to fight crime. Often it is their management and indeed the political leadership in this country, one asshat of a police minister who makes their lives difficult, who makes the lives of ordinary police officers who want to find the criminals, lock up criminals, absolutely difficult. And you see it in stories like these, where these officers worked with the community, got some information, and literally tracked these guys down. There are 8 less violent, murderous criminals on our streets today, thanks to these police officers. There are 8 less individuals who will make your December a living hell, thanks to these police officers. And yes, I said this again, it won't bring back the human life that they've ended. And I really want to see what the investigation uncovers into how many more people have been killed. But in any event, we've got to start celebrating these small wins, especially when we get them like this. Kudos to those police officers, and really condolences, pardon me, to the family who have lost out on an individual here. All right, folks, that's this very long episode of Vuka Nazo, perhaps even the longest one that I've done. So let me end it off over here and say thank you for joining us this morning. Hey, do me a solid favor, please. As I always say, if you like the show, please literally do that. Like it on the platform, whether you're watching this live right now or watching the recording after it. And if you're watching this particularly on YouTube, subscribe, please, to our channel. We super appreciate that. Find us on our website at BigDaddyLiberty.com. That being said, thank you for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow bright and early on Vuka Nazo.